Chief Justice John Roberts entered into the hearing thinking he knew everything, but he had no idea that something was about to shake his faith and all he believed. Jasmine Crockett, the quiet Texas representative, used his own words against him, leaving everyone in the room speechless. It wasn't serene in room 214 of the Rayburn House office building. It was tense and dense with tension, as if something sharp was going to break through the air. It was just another hearing at first, but you could tell that something big was about to happen that would change history. Everyone in that room could feel the change coming. Chief Justice John Roberts, the highest legal authority, sat at the witness table in a Navy suit. Most people in that room could buy a month's worth of groceries with that outfit. He was cool, collected, and sure of himself, but there was a reason this hearing seemed different. It wasn't simply about high-minded ideas about the Constitution anymore. No, this was about something that even the most experienced judges found troubling: judicial ethics. As more people looked into the situation, the highest court in the land was under a lot of pressure because of suspicions about its fairness and secret links. What are the stakes? More than ever before. The committee members took turns asking their questions. Some were soft and some were more direct, but no one was ready for what was about to unfold. And then it was her turn. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and adjusted the mic. Her voice broke the hush, and you could practically feel the room hold its breath. She used to be a public defense and was known for her sharp tongue and uncompromising honesty. She wasn't here to make small conversation. She was here to be held accountable. She started with Chief Justice. It was a simple welcome, but it felt like a challenge in the air. You've said before that the court has a strict standard of ethical behavior, even if there isn't an official code. Is that right? Roberts nodded, looking calm as always. But the next comments from Crockett hurt more than anyone thought they would. She looked over her documents and asked, "So, if that's the case, why wasn't there any information about the relationship between Justice Merritt and a political donor whose case came before the court last year?" The air felt heavy now, like everyone in the room was holding their breath. Roberts fixed his tie, but this time he wasn't as sure of himself as he usually was. He answered calmly, but Crockett was just getting started. She was not finished. "And please correct me if I'm wrong," she said. "The Supreme Court has used the appearance of impropriety as a standard for moral behavior." She stopped and let that linger in the air. Wouldn't it look wrong not to tell someone about a relationship with someone who stands to gain money from a court's decision? There was no sound in the room. Roberts knew that was a loaded question. What did he say? She was careful and planned, but not nearly enough to direct the ship away from the storm she was making. Crockett held on. She continued, I'm quoting directly from the disclosure forms, her voice steady. "Chief Justice, these are facts and they don't make sense." The room got warmer. But that wasn't the end of the story. Crockett pressed even more, and her next question got right to the heart of the matter. "Do you make sure that these disclosures are clear and honest?" Robert stopped for a second. It wasn't much, just a beat, but it was enough. His answer was, not much of a defense. He answered, there is a system in place. Crockett didn't want it. "Interesting," she said, leaning back. She didn't smile, but the silence and the weight of her words spoke for themselves. "Where I come from, if you're in charge of your own supervision, you're not being held responsible. You're just checking your own work." That was the line that changed the mood in the whole room. It was evident that this hearing had just changed when people started whispering, looking quickly, and taking pictures. But Roberts sought to change the subject. "Congresswoman, the courts are supposed to work on their own. We don't let politics get in the way." Crockett quickly replied, "We're not trying to tell you how to rule. We just want to know why certain patterns keep happening and why they go unchecked." As she made her last point, her voice stayed steady. "I spent years in Texas criminal courtrooms watching judges lecture young men, black, brown, and white, about being responsible, about how even the appearance of dishonesty can ruin their lives. So forgive me if I don't believe that the highest court in the land can't be held to the same standard." Now the room was really quiet, and Roberts was on the defensive. He attempted to answer, but Crockett cut him off. "You have no binding code," she said, "and the only review comes from inside the house. That's like asking a fox to file a security report on the hen." House. The quiet was so loud that even the reporters leaned in to catch every word of the conversation. She wasn't trying to show off. She was holding him down. Chief Justice John Roberts took a deep breath and tightened his fingers on the edge of the table. He was still calm, but the tranquility was deceiving him. His responses suddenly sounded like someone who realized that the ice beneath him was thinner than he thought. Roberts remarked, "The court is not above criticism, but there was a catch. I would remind the Congresswoman that respect between co-equal branches is essential." Crockett's eyes didn't move. Her next words weren't just a response, they were a blow. She looked down for a second, then back up, the expression of exasperation on her face. Not because she was losing, but because she knew Roberts was using the term respect to avoid answering. "I respect the court," she said, her voice calm. "I respect what it should be. But respect without honesty is just decoration." She paused, her eyes locking with his. Then she said the final blow, "The people who elected me didn't send me here to admire your robe. They sent me here to ask why the rules seem different depending on who wears the robe." The tension in the room grew. Robert shifted in his chair and looked at her not as a new Congresswoman, but as someone who was ready to take down all of his defenses. He wasn't facing a rookie, he was facing a fighter. And Crockett was just getting started. The major blow was coming next. She opened her folder again. It was thin and only contained a few stapled pages, but it had weight. Not the sort that made noise when dropped, but the kind that made people stop talking. "Chief Justice," she said, her voice chilly and her eyes keen. "Do you know about Dalton versus Mason County, which was decided in the Fifth Circuit in 2009? Roberts blinked and thought for a moment. He recalled the case. "That was a procedural ruling involving judicial recusal, if I'm not mistaken," he said. But Crockett didn't give up. She said, "Actually, it was a judge who didn't recuse himself even though he had indirect financial ties to one of the law firms involved. The ruling made it clear that the appearance of impropriety was grounds for removal." She tapped the edge of the page. "And yet, just last year, Justice Harlan was involved in Macon versus Delta Rail, a case where his longtime friend and financial backer stood to gain a lot from the ruling. That was the moment. It was a challenge, not simply a question." Roberts didn't answer immediately then. He couldn't because the game had just changed. Crockett moved forward, her eyes steely and steady. No recusal, no explanation, no transparency. And the decision came down 5-4. It wasn't simply a call-out, it was a scalpel that cut right through the fragile tissue of the court's defense. Roberts breathed out slowly, and his face was a little strained. His voice was still strong when he added, "Congresswoman, I'm not here to litigate individual cases." She said, "I'm not asking you to." She was calm but strong. "I'm asking you how a court built on the idea of fairness expects the American people to keep faith when its decisions read more like backroom deals than balanced judgment." People gasped, whispered, and a staffer's pen fell to the floor. It was clear that Crockett was there. The quiet was almost deafening. Roberts leaned into the mic to attempt to calm himself. "Your language is inflammatory," he said, but Crockett cut him off. "Your silence has been even worse," she added, each word carefully chosen. She wasn't in a hurry. She let the weight of each word sink in before moving on. She started by saying, "There's a woman named Carla Jennings in my district. She was a single mother who worked nights at a hospital for 20 years. Her son was turned down for financial aid because of a clerical error that made it look like she owed back taxes. She appealed all the way up to a federal court and was told in so many words, 'Tough luck.'" She looked straight at Roberts and said, "But a billionaire with private ties to a sitting justice can get their case heard, argued, and ruled on in less than 4 months, with good results." That hurt. A lot. Roberts's eyes narrowed a little, and his body stiffened. He hadn't expected this much work, especially not from her. He remarked in a calm voice, "The court has limited resources." We have to make tough choices about which cases to take. That doesn't mean we favor one side over the other. Perception matters, doesn't it? She questioned in a loud voice. It was a direct challenge. He didn't answer. She questioned again, Chief Justice, does perception matter? He nodded softly. Of course. Crockett didn't stop. She was getting more and more angry. Then I suggest you start caring a little more about what the people are seeing. Right now, they're not seeing justice. They're seeing power protecting itself. For the first time, Roberts didn't have a comeback. The room had changed totally. The committee chair didn't say anything, and the crowd kept quiet, spellbound. This was a momentous moment. Crockett's comments were breaking through even though she wasn't raising her voice. She turned to another page and said, I came here today with respect, but I also came with facts. And the facts say your institution has a problem, a deep one. And it's time someone stopped pretending otherwise. But the big change hadn't happened yet. Roberts moved forward a little and clasped his hands again, attempting to take charge again. But his rhythm was off, and he wasn't calm anymore. Congresswoman, he said, his voice less sure, I understand your passion, but I would advise you not to make conclusions based on single events without a full understanding of the legal process. Crockett didn't blink. With all due respect, Chief Justice, I'm not making conclusions. I'm making connections. There's a difference. That was it. The floor tilted. Roberts's eyes weren't on her anymore. They were on her. And that was when she decided what to do next. She held up another paper and said, in 2013, you gave a commencement speech at Harvard Law. You told the graduates, your credibility is your currency. You said, the moment people stop believing in your integrity, everything else collapses. Roberts leaned back and said, that's right. Then Crockett gave the ultimate blow. Then tell me, Chief Justice, how does credibility survive when public trust in your institution is at its lowest in decades, when polls show that more Americans believe the court is driven by politics than by principle? He didn't react right away, so she pushed harder. You don't get to spend 20 years building a reputation and then act surprised when the silence around your coworkers starts to break it. Roberts opened his mouth, but Crockett didn't wait this time. She was done. No, she wasn't putting on a show. She was pinning him down. Chief Justice John Roberts took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the table's edge. The calm he had relied on for so long was starting to break down. His tone was still firm, but his answers now had the quiet desperation of someone who is realizing that the ice beneath him is thinner than he thought. Roberts remarked in a calm voice, the court is not above criticism. He then added, but I would remind the Congresswoman that respect between co-equal branches is essential. Crockett looked down and then back up. Her face showed a flash of anger, but not because she was losing. She could see Roberts was trying to get her to stop. I respect the court, she said in a calm, measured voice. I respect what it should be. But respect without honesty is just decoration. The room was tense now. You could feel the change. The people who elected me didn't send me here to admire your robe. They sent me here to ask why the rules seem to change depending on who wears the robe. Roberts moved forward and looked at her as if she were not a freshman congresswoman anymore, but as if she were ready to take down all of his defenses. And she was just getting started. The real hit was coming next. She glanced through her documents and pulled out something little and unassuming. Thin, scarcely more than a few stapled pages, but they were heavy. Not the type that makes noise when dropped, but the kind that made everyone stop talking. She said in a firm voice, Chief Justice, do you know about Dalton versus Mason County, which was decided in the Fifth Circuit in 2009? Roberts blinked in thought. That was a procedural ruling about a judge's recusal, if I'm not mistaken, he remarked. Crockett, on the other hand, wasn't giving up. Actually, it was about a judge who didn't recuse himself, even though he had indirect financial ties to one of the law firms involved. The ruling made it clear that the appearance of impropriety was grounds for removal. She tapped the edge of the page. And yet, just last year, Justice Harlan took part in Macon versus Delta Rail, a case where his longtime friend and financial backer stood to gain a lot from the ruling. That was the moment. It was a challenge, not just a question. Crockett leaned forward and pushed harder. No recusal, no explanation, no transparency, and the decision came down 5-4. The room changed, and you could practically feel everyone holding their breath. Roberts didn't answer right away, so Crockett moved in. "I'm not asking you to sue people. I'm asking you how a court that is based on fairness expects the American people to keep faith when its decisions look more like backroom deals than fair judgments." There was no sound in the room now, no clicks or whispers, only Crockett's voice, which sounded like a stone hitting glass. Roberts leaned toward the mic to try to regain control. "Your language is inflammatory," he murmured, his voice firm but faint. "Your silence has been—" Even worse, Crockett cut him off. She wasn't yelling. She let the stillness do the work, letting each syllable sink in further. Crockett went on, "There's a woman named Carla Jennings in my district. She was a single mother who worked nights at a hospital for 20 years. A clerical error made it look like she owed back taxes, so her kid couldn't get financial aid. She took her case all the way to a federal court, which told her, in so many words, tough luck." She looked Roberts in the eye. "But a billionaire who knows a sitting judge personally can get their case heard, argued, and decided in less than 4 months, with good results." The weight of her remarks fell on the room like a hurricane. Roberts' eyes narrowed a little, but Crockett wasn't done yet. Roberts stated the court doesn't have a lot of money. We have to make hard choices about which cases to take. That doesn't mean favoritism. Perception is important, isn't it? Crockett asked in a soft yet harsh voice. The stress was getting worse. Roberts didn't say anything, but she didn't let it go. "Chief Justice, does how people see things matter?" Roberts nodded and said yes, almost in a whisper. "Then I suggest you start caring a little more about what the people are seeing," Crockett remarked in a calm voice. "Because they don't see justice right now. They're seeing power defending itself." The stillness that followed was so loud it hurt. Roberts didn't have a response this time. His posture relaxed. The old calm tone, legal jargon, and measured distance weren't enough anymore. Crockett's remarks had scared him. She wasn't finished. She didn't come here to fight with the Supreme Court judge. Crockett didn't come for that. He came for something bigger. Something that resonated to the folks watching at home, who didn't know the names of the cases, but felt the effects of them every day. Crockett added, "There's a man in Odessa," and she slowed down. "His name is Jorge Salgado. He worked all through the pandemic. He filed a petition when his brother was held in a private immigration facility and not given medical attention. The court turned it down without even hearing the facts." She stopped for a moment. Roberts didn't get why. She went on, "So I told him that was the law. It's impossible to fight against unfairness when the system hides behind terminology that was made to protect the powerful." She leaned in, and the room leaned with her, as if they were all waiting for the next words to change everything. "And the highest court in this country could have fixed that," she stated firmly. "But you all wouldn't listen to it. No explanation, no statement. Nothing." Roberts didn't say anything. Crockett went on, "These aren't just ideas, Chief Justice. These are genuine people who still believe in the law, even when it hurts them. People who believe that if they work hard and follow the rules, someone at the top will care enough to listen to them." Now she looked around the room, and we need to ask ourselves what will happen when those people stop believing. When do they cease believing that justice is conceivable for someone who doesn't own a business, pay for a campaign, or sit on a board? Her voice sounded rough now. "Nor rage, nor performance, simply the truth." Crockett remarked, "I became a lawyer because I thought the law could be a tool for fairness. I stayed a lawyer because I learned that the law is only as fair as the people who apply it." There was a lot of stillness in the room. She was done, and today I'm sitting across from someone who has more power than most of us will ever have, but they won't admit that power can go unchecked. Robert spoke for the first time, but his voice wasn't as strong. "Congresswoman, I agree that certain choices have bad effects. But the court's job is not to save people. It is to read the law as it is written." Crockett nodded. "And what happens when the law is written to help a few people and is read in a way that helps those who are already at the top?" She didn't need him to say anything. She already knew he wouldn't. "You talk about judicial independence," she continued, "but independence without accountability isn't strength, it's isolation." Someone in the back said, "She's right." Crockett didn't stop. She turned the last page and spoke clearly and slowly. "This isn't just about politics. It's a matter of principle. It's about letting folks like Jorge and Carla know that their lives matter, that their stories still matter when they leave your courtroom." One last challenge to everyone in the room came from her gaze. "If this court won't take responsibility, it's up to the people, through us, to start asking tougher, louder questions." The camera zoomed up on Roberts' face. There was no smile, no mask, and no sound. Crockett wasn't done yet. She carefully closed her folder and put her hands on the table. Her speech was suddenly quiet and thoughtful. "You know, we had this old judge when I was growing up in St. Louis. He was white, retired from the army, and tough as nails, but he said something I'll never forget. A courtroom is only as honest as the people who are brave enough to question it." She looked at Roberts, and everyone in the room realized she had just spoken something they couldn't ignore. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." There was no drama or acclaim, just gravity. It seemed like her words had been chiseled into the space, so there was no way to get them wrong. Roberts moved his chair but didn't say anything. His confidence hadn't gone away. It had just finally been met by someone who didn't regard it like it was precious. Representative Leonard Franks, a veteran from Arizona who doesn't often speak up during these hearings, moved into his mic and said, "Damn, it wasn't a rule. It wasn't a debate. It was respect." And Crockett didn't even say anything. She wasn't here to get compliments. Chairman Bledsoe eventually spoke, but his voice was slower than normal. "The committee thanks Representative Crockett for the questions she asked." He even seemed careful, as if he thought that hurrying to the next part would shatter something fragile. Robert's hand shook as he reached for his glass of water. Crockett saw it, but most people didn't. She looked him straight in the eye. "You don't have to agree with me, Chief Justice, but you heard me. That's all I came for." She didn't sound angry. No bragging, just something much harder to ignore, the truth told without an apology. One by one, the other members started to ask questions, but the mood had changed. The questions suddenly seemed less like they were meant to show off and more like they were meant to get to the point. Nobody wanted to follow her, but they had to. And no one wanted to be seen as cleaning up after what she had just done. Roberts even reacted differently now. His responses were shorter and less theoretical, and his tone was clipped. His charm was hidden. He wasn't on the defense. But he knew. The hearing was already trending outside the building. People were sharing clips of Crockett's interaction on social media like crazy. People who didn't care about how the Supreme Court worked were now watching a whole congressional clip while they ate lunch at a coffee shop near the Capitol. A barista paused, taking orders to play back a line that Crockett had spoken. A little black girl in a Dallas school asked her teacher, "Is she a lawyer?" People who had lost faith in the system felt something they hadn't felt in a long time, representation that didn't seem like compromise. Roberts finally looked at Crockett again while they were at room 2141, for only a second. But this time, there was no better. There was realization not of loss, but of understanding. She wasn't a celebrity on the rise. She wasn't the future. She was the present. But Crockett still had one last thing to say, even if the room remained quiet. This wasn't simply about morals or hearings, it was about leaving a mark. The room went back to its normal rhythm, at least on the surface, but everyone who was paying attention could tell something was different. What had started as another perfectly planned hearing was now defined by a moment that no one could rewind or talk over. Jasmine Crockett wasn't saying anything anymore, but she was still there. Her words were still in the room, like a law that hadn't been written yet. She had done more than talk to a Supreme Court justice. She made the whole machine flicker. As the hearing went on, other people asked questions, but Crockett just sat there and listened. No smirks or side comments, just silence. She knew what had happened. She didn't need to say it again. Chairman Bledsoe called a short break around 30 minutes later, when the questioning was over. Members stood up and staff members stood up. A few reporters hurried to get their stories in. Roberts got up, but he looked back before he could leave the table. "Congresswoman," he replied, his voice a little lower, "your district is lucky to have you." Crockett looked up. "I know." He nodded slightly, this time less formally and more like a person, and then he turned to leave. He didn't seem shaken anymore. He was simply quiet. As the room cleared, a law student from Missouri who was wearing a blazer that was 2 sizes too big walked up to Crockett slowly. "I just wanted to say," she started, "that I didn't think anyone ever talked to them like that." "Not for real." Crockett got up and fixed her sleeves. "What do you mean by that?" she inquired. The pupil said, "Like they're not above you." Crockett grinned, but not too much or too little. "They're not." That was it. She grabbed her notes and left the hearing room without saying anything else. Later that night, the exchange made it to the headlines all around the country, not just on political shows, but also on prime time. People weren't interested in the fight. If Crockett had taught a class, not just won an argument, people who wrote about it tried to frame it. Some people said it was a threat to the status quo. Some others believed it was showboating. But those who saw the whole thing, those who listened instead of just reacting, felt something different: clarity. People had been told for years that the Supreme Court was precious and couldn't be touched, but Crockett had proven, calmly and legally, that even sacred things need to be questioned. That kind of power without limits isn't order, it's decay. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of discomfort in that hearing room was what justice required. The truth is that real change doesn't often come with loud slogans and banners. Sometimes it comes in silently, with one voice that doesn't back down when someone powerful attempts to stop it. And if Jasmine Crockett could sit across from the Chief Justice of the United States and tell the truth, then maybe, just maybe, more people could do the same in their own lives, in their own towns, at their workplaces, and at home. That's the problem with times like these. They're not just for the individuals who are there. We own them. Hit the subscribe button if this tale made you feel something, because there are more like it. And we're just getting started.